Welcome, everybody. My name is Lucjan Zaborowski. I am a VP of Marketing here at Bright. I am very excited to have with me Brian Vermeer from Sneak. We're going to talk about all things hacking related since it's Hacktoberfest. This is the month where we talk about all things hacking. So me and Brian will get right into it and talk about a bunch of things. But first, Brian, how about you give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and what you do at Sneak?
Absolutely. My name is Brian Vermeer. I am based in the Netherlands, an hour south of Amsterdam, which pretty much means in my country you're almost in Belgium. So, like, my country is this big. Anyway, I do all things Java. I am a Java engineer by trade, and now for Sneak, I work as a developer advocate, which means I do some engineering, but I also talk to developers, see what their problem areas is, and how our tooling can help them in their way of working and to prevent security issues from the get-go. And that is my main goal currently.
Amazing. So I am sure you hear a lot about hacking from the developers and their own experiences and things that they have been through in terms of risks and vulnerabilities. Now, for the general public, for the general audience, what would you say are the biggest misconception about hacking? When developers talk about it versus the general public.
Well, developers look at it from a technical angle, obviously, but I think the biggest misconception in general is that people that think that they that are tech savvy, they think they will not get caught. For instance, will not be part of a social engineering scheme or problems that will not cover them with phishing, for instance. A couple of years ago, and it was before I joined Sneak, I worked at a company, and obviously back in that day, that's like almost 10 years ago, it wasn't that often that they did these trial runs of phishing emails. And they did this. And a lot of the engineering folks that normally are tech savvy clicked on it and put in credentials for the Wi-Fi network. And therefore turned out that if you put things on the right time at the right moment, and if you know that people are, for instance, in a stress situation because they have to deliver, say, end of the quarter, like when all end of the quarter is a thing. But if you come up with that and it sounds okay-ish, then people fall for these tricks. And a lot of people think that that will not happen to me because I know I can find these things and fish them out, as in I'm not vulnerable or I will not be fooled. And I think everybody can be fooled, and we should not leave our guards down and be aware of these things. So I think that is one of the general misconceptions, that even if you're tech savvy, you can be fooled.
Okay, that's pretty scary, especially if you're not tech savvy. You have to be extra careful. But it sounds like, from that point of view, obviously all of us can benefit from learning and keep educating ourselves about what are the types of attacks, how do they look like, just so for ourselves, of course, we can be safer out there, right? So what are those things that you see are the big trends and threats that we should be all mindful of, and even if we're not experts on them, at least be aware of them so we don't fall ourselves into the trap of being hacked? What are the types of attacks, I guess, that we need to really be on the lookout for?
I think the hype train currently is how do you call it? What's the word for that? When you use somebody else's software, then you might be supply chain. I was looking for the word supply chain. Supply chain problems are a thing. People are still using outdated pieces of software, outdated funnels, outdated operating systems, all these kinds of things, even maybe in IoT devices, outdated things. And if vulnerabilities are found in programs or libraries that are used by the operating systems or the programs that you're using, in the end, you're vulnerable to attacks. So that means that we have to be very careful of, hey, what are we using? Who is the supplier? What is going into all that flow? It can be just the program that I'm using, but also another program that comes into that. For instance, it can even be your word processor. If there is a, or your browser, if you have an outdated browser that has a library that is known, like probably the engineers will update that. But if you don't update that, people might come into that browser and you're like, maybe this is not the worst thing in the world because who wants to see what I'm looking at? It's all fine. But depending on that, they can piggyback on that and get into your computer and take over credentials and that kind of stuff. So it's always a chain of attacks that comes to the problem. And I think the whole supply chain thing, that if we look at what's coming or what's there in the process to create whatever we're using on a day-to-day basis, how many players are there? And if one of these players has a vulnerability, then it comes up to, okay, now in the end, I, the user, am vulnerable as well. So the way to prevent that is to be keen on updating things. And it's easy as updating your browser and your operating system. But you see that people are looking in that supply chain if we can attack one part of that chain, and it ends up at millions and millions of users all over the world, all using the same piece of software. Think of things like SolarWind or something like that.
I mean, it sounds like for a general user, just making sure that your software, your browser is all up to date, that you really don't wait, but make sure things are patched to the latest version.
And
but
don't
on the
don't
other side, sorry, the other side seems like for the more the developer side and AppSec teams, it is the supply chain security, but that ties very much to inventory, right? A bill of materials of what do you have, what is it that you're actually using, and then auditing it to make sure that that stuff in there isn't something that can put you at risk.
Absolutely, but it's not only auditing, it's also like knowing what you're using. Why am I choosing a certain package, library, framework to build this kind of thing from the get-go, instead of doing that afterwards, like, oh, we deliver something, we have a bill of materials, and then see the problem. No, that whole shift left thing, making development aware of these things, I think that is the key thing of catching these things early and often. And say that the engineers do, and they deliver a newer version of whatever you are using as an end user, it's up to you to update. And if you wait with updating, like, yeah, I have this big presentation coming up or this big code coming up, I postpone it to next week, might not be the best case, depending on what the threat level is of what your company is working with, or what kind of security risks you are aware of, depending from company to company, obviously. But that can be like, there is no thing as incubation time. Like, if a thing is vulnerable and people know it's getting automated, and people are attacking it right away once it's known. So update and patch as a end user as soon as possible. Or if you know that something is vulnerable, maybe make the choice not to use it, even though it means cutting on profit for the short term. It might help you on the longer term. So that's when you need threat analysis to see what is the possible impact of a certain problem in a piece of software that you're using.
And that was one of my questions as to what are the key steps that organizations can take to secure themselves. And you mentioned one of them already, which is that shift left, or empowering developers to be part of the security process, right? To be part of from the get-go as they are building, very much in the early process, making sure that whatever they are building, they have a more narrower view, let's say, but that means that they can test more precisely, maybe in a smaller packages, the things that will be pushed out later on, right? And they potentially have the authentication because they're building it to also test for that. So it seems like really empowering developers is one of the key steps that is definitely worth emphasizing. And it seems like that's what you are saying as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is key. That is the key, and not making it a hurdle, but making it easy to find this, because as a developer, you're creating things. You are a creator, not a breaker. So you don't have that breaking mindset as a hacker has. Has the mindset of I want to break into things, and a developer wants to build things, and their KPIs is to build this feature or build this piece of software or build this screen, whatever. So they think of, okay, how it should work, and then look at some paths. If they don't work, fine, we can test that. Uh, so there is a piece of education that is needed, both for developers and end users, what can happen. Um, and preferably tooling that can help them find it without pulling up walls and all sorts of burdens for them, to find it easy and to fix it easy, to see like, okay, oh, that makes sense. Maybe we should look at that. And if that is easy, you might do it right away and you get adoption on it. If it is an afterthought, like we create something, it all works, and then we find out there's an issue, then you might already be too late, or it will cost you a lot of time and effort to recreate it because things might have changed. A library is updated, which means I need to update my code, or I need to update somebody else's code, or it doesn't fit within the landscape of all the applications that we're using because APIs changed, or things like that. Then you have to redo everything again. So making it easy to spot these things for the development crew, and together with the security teams, handling it from the get-go, and making them aware of these things, that it's also an obligation for them to do that. Then we're at the right path. It's not the end yet, but it's like we're getting somewhere.
Where would you say we are in the cycle of developer empowerment and education? Are we very early on still? Do you see many organizations already implementing both education and developer empowerment? Where are we? Are we still trying to figure things out, or do organizations mostly know what they're doing?
Um, it obviously depends on organization, but if we look in general, I see that no developer wants to be insecure. Every developer wants to create software or pieces of software that are good, that are performant, and that are secure. Only if you look at what their tasks are, they are all functional. Like if I click on this, it needs to do that. These kind of tickets they have. Security is implicit, and it's hard to measure. Like how much time should I put into security to make it to what is the return on investment on it? Well, that's hard. Like not getting breached is one thing, but so then you go into the whole threat modeling aspect of security, like how important is it? But again, it's in most cases an afterthought, because we would think of features and functionality at first, and then it's like, oh yeah, we need to be secure as well. We nowadays think about scalability because we're in the cloud, and taking more cloud instance will cost us money, because so that's easy. But how about security? As long as you're not breached, it's fine for the CEO upstairs, right?
Hmm.
So that is the shift that we need to make for developers, and people are getting there. But the thing is, I think it already starts in school, like college, university, whatever people are, or boot camps, whatever people are doing. They are educated to be builders, not breakers. So we need to get into there, and you see slowly that's coming up there, like in these educational programs. You see step by step, you see some improvement. But for individuals in a company, it depends. If it's an early startup, it's probably like, push it out. We need this earlier than our competitors, to make a move, to make profit, to get the market. Versus, do we take a step back and look at it from a security point of view? Because that takes time. So it's always a trade-off. And again, then you come into what kind of risks are you? What kind of data are you working with? But it's starting to get there, but we're still working on that piece. That's part of my job currently.
Yeah. Well, of course, it's also super hard when you constantly have something new coming into the picture. Now AI is coming into the picture, right? And
Yep.
from what I understand, a lot of the code that's already being produced, maybe it's already half of it, is already generated using or with the help of AI tools.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, how do you see these emerging technologies like AI and maybe others, and you tell me what others do you see out there that will be changing the way developers work, but also might impact how hacking happens and how the prevention needs to address it, or there needs to be an effort to try to prevent it from a different angle, right? From looking at it from many other sides, because the technology is moving so quickly.
Absolutely. The technology is moving very quickly. Uh, However, I think that AI is a great tool for code development. For me personally, it saves me a lot of typing. Like my repetitive strain injury with on my keyboard, that's a great thing. However, it depends on what model you're using and how that model is fed. If my model is fed on my own code and I make all these mistakes already, then the suggestions that my AI model comes up with, and we have a couple of these things that help you within your IDE to create code, might be good, might not be good, depending on your previous code base. So it's always like if there is garbage in, garbage out kind of situation. If the model is trained on bad behavior, on bad code, the suggestions or the created code will be bad as well. That means that for developers, and I think for everybody, there is still, it's like the only thing that AI does, it creates bulks of code. And that's great because it might comes up with smarter solutions that you might have thought of. But there needs to be somebody that thinks and that reads and that understands what it's actually doing. Because if you do not understand and you just take it for granted, then, for instance, ChatGPT is very convincing, but also in very many cases, very convincingly wrong. So I think there's a shift from creating and typing to generate it, see if it works, assess it, and maybe adapt to it to make sure that it's according to the standards and the policies that you want from a developer point of view. Now, on the other side, from the attacker's point of view, general attacks that are known for years can be generated. Code can be generated for that. Like people already created scripts, but now they can even generate these scripts, even people that do not know enough about it or know well enough about it, like the super experts. Luckily, a lot of these models have some sort of safeguards built in, like asks ChatGPT to build a hack for you. He will say no, he or she, I don't know if like what gender we need to create it, but we'll say no. But if you create your own model, there is no safeguard anymore. There is no thought of what kind of behavior is something that we wish, is something that would not wish to see. So it is possible it will be easier, which moreover means that the known attacks that are there can be generated faster. There can be exploits generated faster. That's the conclusion that we have to make, which means it's even more important for us that if there is a new patch or update, to update even faster for that. And that is for now the only thing we can do. We obviously can use AI to generate training programs or something like that, or explain to us why things are vulnerable. That might be on the educational side, but from the hacking side, it's probably, if I train my model correctly, it's probably not that hard to generate exploits from it.
And from the attacking side, do you see new types of attacks emerging from new tech, or do you just think there's going to be more of the same, but more of them and maybe more sophisticated?
I don't know yet, and I think it's too early to see. We're not even on the, if you see that how a hypes works, it's going up, and we're not even at that top yet. Then it's going down, it's flooding out, and it's getting to a plateau. We're not yet at that high yet. So we'll see. Maybe it comes up with very sneaky kind of exploits that combine certain things, but we have to remember that everything is trained based on things that are already there. So most likely, it will be a little bit smarter than the average human, but as a collective, we still need to think and assess how we're going to solve things. And I think we just need to learn how to work with these kind of technologies and embrace it.
Hmm. Well, yes, and be prepared, right? And from that point of view, what would you recommend be the kind of the top resources or places to go for everybody really to learn, educate, and be ready and I guess I'm sure you talk to developers every day about this, so I'm curious as to what are their favorite places also to learn and go to just be up to date, right, with things that are happening and gain more of that security understanding as well.
Yep. Well, obviously, if you just it's not like play that, but if you're an end user and you're not an engineer, but you're just using stuff, uh, hopefully your company has some sort of onboarding training on security, on general security practices. What should you do? What shouldn't be you be doing? And I think it's a mandatory thing for most banks and insurance companies and these kind of things. At least when I worked there in different companies, we need to go through such training that you have general awareness. That is very important. Um, I think it's very important that there are tools in place for every user, like single sign on with easy things like two-factor authentication via your phone or via something else that is already baked in for you, so it's easy to use. Because if it's not easy to use, people will go around it, because in the end, profit is more important than, if you look at the lower levels of a company in the structure, they need to make their KPIs. Like, so make these security things like authentication, authorization as easy as possible. And I hope that every company has that already in place. And if not, they should. From a developer perspective, where would I go? Well, there are obviously, I would go to Sneak, as in the Sneak blog has a lot of resources, and specifically for developers in different ecosystems. Like, I'm serving the Java and Kotlin ecosystem, but my colleagues are serving the JavaScript, and like many different languages or many different angles that need to have some more deeper understanding on what kind of security issues are there. So look at that. We have a free learning platform, Sneak Learn, which you can use to understand certain kind of known problems like cross-site scripting or SQL injection. How does that work, and how can we prevent it? Just to have the basic understanding, like, oh, that's happening. And if you have that basic understanding, then you can augment that to the rest of your work. Other things, obviously, are the OWASP Foundation. OWASP Foundation has a lot of good cheat sheet and documents on how to work with certain technologies and what are the current standards to be using. But in general, it's just keeping your eyes open, read around, go and see what other peers in the same fashion that you're working with, say you're a designer or a developer, are doing now. What is new, what is happening, and how can we use that, or does that help you prevent security issues in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, these are all good. I was going to mention OWASP and OWASP Top 10, of course, as a good place to go. I was also going to mention Discord and some of those, social media communities where you can actually ask questions
Absolutely.
and learn from others directly. Some extent, maybe.
Go for instance, go and see if you have local meetups that cover that. I know OWASP have different chapters. There is also a DevSecOps community that has different chapters in different cities all over the world. A Discord channel, what you're mentioning, and talk to people like, hey, have you encountered this, or how should we solve this, and collectively learn. Like, and that's the beginning, and then we can see how we can be better. Because if you look at the OWASP Top 10, for years, the same things are in that same top 10, only sometimes in a little bit different order. But it's the same kind of breaches and same kind of type of attacks are there for already there for many, many years.
That's true, and so there's definitely a lot that there is to learn, but to some extent there are things that once you learn them, they are pretty consistent, right? And there's things that just kind of stay with you, and they're not going to dramatically change anytime soon. So you have that foundation that will be useful no matter what. And I think the second part is the community. I know Sneak is building a super dev community, and you being on here and talking with me is another aspect of that community. So I'm very grateful and thank you for joining me and having this conversation. Very, very useful. We're gonna continue to do these interviews and talk more about other related topics. But Brian, I wanted to thank you for this time and some really insightful answers. And yeah, I'm excited to do this again in the near future.
Absolutely, I'm open for that, and just give me a call, and we'll do it again. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you so much, and thanks everybody. We'll talk to you soon.